Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Corrupt Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2009 crime comedy movie titled Next Day Air. Now, Next Day Air's runtime is 1 hour and 24 minutes long. It is directed by Benny Boom. It was produced by Scott Aronson, Innie Clemens, and Michael Williams. The script was written by Blair Cobbs. It is composed by The Elements. The cinematography by David A. Armstrong. And it was edited by David Chazelle. And the stars of the movie are Donald Faison, Mike Epps, Wood Harris, Yasmin Deliz, Omari Hardwick, Eddie Winslow himself, Darius McCrary, Cisco Reyes, Emilio Rivera, Lobo Sebastian, Mos Def, Lauren London, Debbie Allen, Cassidy, Joe D. Jonz, Malik Barnhardt, and Christine Lai. So, after spending many years directing music videos from rappers like 50 Cent, Mos Def, Lil Wayne, you name it, Benny Boom makes his debut in this ultra-violent, gratuitously vulgar comedy known as Next Day Air. What may stand out from all the other films of this magnitude is that plenty of heart was put into this movie that doesn't get the credibility it deserves. This movie is definitely truly played with heart, with dedication, and this is one of the reasons why this movie truly stands out as a very overlooked and underrated movie. Is it gonna win Oscars? No fucking chance in hell. Is it going to be a movie that will spark some kind of moral message? I think you should get off the good stuff and see for yourself if this movie is going to be uplifting or change your perspectives or your ways in life, because there's no chance in hell that that's going to happen either. Because let's face it, there are no moral characters in this movie. Nobody here has any kind of significant likability in this movie. And maybe there's probably only one character that truly could actually label or identify themselves as a full-fledged mature adult. And yes, this movie is for adults. If you take your kids to watch this movie, you guys are all out of your fucking minds. Because who in the living hell would want to recommend you to watch this movie with your kids? No. If you're gonna watch this movie, I suggest, if you have kids, to just, tuck them into bed and tell them, wait till you're 18, because this movie is rated R. Just so you'll know. There's a lot of swearing in this movie. There's a lot of violence in this movie. The climax in this movie is really, really, really nails it in. There are no role models in this movie at all. Not one. But it's still a movie that Benny Boom took to great heart in making. So I gotta say, hats off to him. He wanted to try to get his luck into... I'm sure he made a lot of money directing music videos. But now he wants to try and settle for a full-fledged movie. We gave him a chance. and it turns out with surprising results. The story focuses primarily on 10 bricks of cocaine that get sent to the wrong address and in the wrong hands. These bricks of cocaine come from an unnerving drug dealer all the way from Calexico, California, to his employee all the way in Philadelphia by way of next day air delivery service. Donald Faison, who is best known for his role on the TV sitcom Scrubs, stars as the perpetually stoned delivery man named Leo Jackson, who is so messed up he accidentally sends the package to apartment 302 instead of apartment number 303, which inevitably leads to a chain of unpredictable events. That's the beauty of this movie. It's just so unpredictable. And the best part about this movie too is that it's not to be taken seriously. Sure, there's the walking, talking, living, eating, breathing stereotypes. And yeah, it does kind of will push certain groups back. But if you could just watch this with an open mind and not take everything too personally or seriously, I think you will have a ball with this movie. I think that's what sometimes the problem is. People take things too seriously. This is not real life, folks. I mean, sure, you might probably see a few characters here that might be believable. I'm not saying they all are, but there are probably a few handful of people who you may have met before that are relatable. And maybe not in such a good way either. I'm just saying. The bricks wind up in the hands of inept, small-time crooks named Gooch, played by Wood Harris, Brody, played by Mike Epps, and Hassie, played by Malik Barnhardt. But the bricks were instead supposed to have went to a pint-sized but temperamental drug dealer by the name of Jesus, played by Cisco Reyes. Yes, he prefers to be called Jesus. He does not want to be referred to as Jesus. And yes, that's right. He wants to be called Jesus, not the dude on the cross. He wants to be named Jesus, pronounced like the dude on the cross. He do not like to go by Jesus. Sorry about that. He wants to be called Jesus. That's how his name wants to be pronounced. Keep that in mind, folks. And while Hassie spends most of his time snoozing on the couch, Gooch and Brody, who have a remarkable chemistry and comedic timing, well, the reason why these guys are small-time crooks is because even they can't seem... These guys are practically just kids who had never grown up. Okay, they're not necessarily technically kids. They're adults. But they live, they breathe, and they act like children. I mean, they think that living the life like crooks by, they can't even get a bank robbery done right. Of course, they carry their little guns, and they do stupid shit like put nylon stockings over their faces so that they won't be identified. They point guns at the tellers at the bank and tell people to get on the ground and all that shit. But they can't even get a fucking robbery done right. Instead, they walk out with a small cash reward. I mean, obviously these guys never really ever got their acts together as adults. And what do they do when they're not robbing banks? Well, Hassie, all he practically does is just sleeps on their couch all fucking day and all fucking night. While Gooch and Brody, can't even do a proper decent bank robbery. So when they're not robbing banks, they're practically just on their little Xbox, playing video games all day and yelling at a screen. Like I said before, children. They're just children trapped in the bodies of adults. And I'm not saying that the next day air delivery character Leo is in any way, shape, or form a mature adult himself. I mean, he's always smoking weed. He's always doing all this shit. He's a lazy fuck who seems to get his act together. And he's even being reprimanded every day by his boss, who, by the way, happens to be his mother, played by Debbie Allen. Mrs. Jackson is probably maybe the only mature adult in this movie. And yet she also lays it on the line for Leo Jackson that if he fucks up one more time, he's out. He's fired. And she doesn't give a fuck if she's his mother. So Leo, he better straighten up, or he'll have to be shipped out. Take your pick. But Gooch and Brody definitely have a great, remarkable balance in chemistry and comedic timing. So when they see these bricks of cocaine, you look at the bricks and it's like, this is not cocaine. This is a fucking gold mine. White gold. This cocaine could be worth a lot of money. So Gooch and Brody have a plan to get about $150,000 if they sell this cocaine to their cousin Shavu, played by Omari Hardwick, before the real owners catch on to Leo's blunder. Though Faison, who really shows just how talented he is at comedy and his delivery, get it? Because he's a delivery guy. It is brilliant beyond compare. But he's actually really just rendered to a supporting role here. The real standouts are from Wood Harris and Mike Epps as Gooch and Brody. Sure, they are vicious gangsters, albeit inept in nature. They live in a dingy apartment with bootlegged ammo. They may not be the kind of guys who will be approved by one's parents. They are still just a bunch of lovable idiots who never reached a level of maturity since high school graduation. Like I said, they're kids, even though they're adults. They act like kids. They talk like kids. When they're not messing up on bank robberies, they spend most of their time on their Xbox yelling at a television every time they mess up at a game. Children trapped in the bodies of adults. That's how I see them. If there's actually a character who has a little bit of an arc and perhaps a little more development, it would have to be Omari Hardwick's character as Cousin Shavu. He is a smooth and clever drug dealer who has the ability to take a small item and make it bigger. So by breaking the bricks until it manifests to white powder. And sure, he's a con artist, but he has aspirations of wanting to get out of the drug business and carving a path on his own. So he's going to do this one last time. And he thinks that maybe by doing this whole situation with these bricks of cocaine, this would be his long-awaited chance to double his profit of the coke as just a way out of life, out of this life, and into a more legitimate career path. So you know what? If he does so, we say to him, good for him. He is actually maybe the only character who actually does have another type of ambition. Next day, Air truly runs on high adrenaline with laughter. And it's mostly just due to the awkward situation each character faces as they're treated from one goofy situation to the next. The best thing about it is that although every scene runs on dark comedy and sheer stupidity, the performers know that they are in a stupid movie and never takes themselves way too seriously. Mostaf also appears quite briefly as a fellow delivery man and a colleague of Leo's who goes by the name of Eric. And even though his mother, Mrs. Jackson, seems to not take Leo's hard work and dedication to her standards and would prefer Eric, saying that, he's a role model. But actually behind their backs, Eric often tends to be quite sneaky and has a habit of stealing parcels from people and usually often replaces them with duds. But the movie just doesn't seem to depend on comedy itself. In fact, there's a great high level of intensity in every scene, and the climax at the end is very, very brutal and deadly, and not everyone survives. Especially when, like the drug dealer, the kingpin, flies all the way from California to Philadelphia to search for the bumbling delivery guy who delivered a package to the wrong door. I mean, it still can be played off to some level of comedy, but it's also very high in intentions, especially when he comes around. And then, when they actually do find the package, it becomes an all-out bloody war where there's a massive body count. There are people who do survive, but not everybody does. And some people might say that throughout this movie, it's mostly played off as a comedy with a lot of ghetto dialogue in this movie. It is mostly a comedy. And maybe this extremely brutal final climax just sort of comes from out of nowhere. but the results are unpleasant and extremely brutal. Sure, I understand that people might say that this movie hasn't aged really well, or that the colors are off-putting and the lighting can be off-kilter at times. It doesn't hide the fact that it was made under a low budget and ran on a very tight schedule with very few takes through each scene. Remember, this movie is only 84 minutes long. Many have speculated that this movie is similar to those blaxploitation films of the 70s, but I tend to differ. Next Day Air kind of like has a more similar vibe to like Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs, where the criminally insane call the shots. Yes, it should be known that this movie is saturated with badly done stereotypes that may provide a bit of a really, really negative image to both African Americans and Hispanic Americans. I mean, it's a lot of ghetto talk, a lot of ebonics, a lot of, tough guy hoodlum language is really spoken throughout this movie. When yet, we're trying to sort of like branch ourselves away from this imagery in a time where filmmakers of these ethnic demographics want to like look away from this kind of past imagery, and they want to create films with a more positive outlook to their lives, where African Americans are not speaking in ghetto garbage, or Hispanics, or even entering these kind of career paths that could either make them or break them. They want a more positive image. They want a little more caution towards how their characters are portrayed. So people might be taken aback. And I can understand that. Next Day Air does set them back. But worry-free here, folks, because director Benny Boom, who happens to be African American, he seems to be okay with making movies about his people while taking pride to make it satirical, I should say, because life can't be serious all the time. So get a grip, guys, and all your preaching about wanting to make things into a positive image. Tell that to Benny Boom. Okay? I mean, movies like Boys in the Hood, even though it has a much more positive image, there's still a lot of negative stereotypes that go on in that movie. Do the Right Thing has that kind of similar vibe. Menace to Society. But those movies were actually very serious in its delivery. This movie was not to be taken seriously. It's satire. And sure, the climax was really vicious and dangerous. Just sit back and enjoy the ride. And then you can also preach to your kids about the dangers that these guys are taking and ensure them that this is not the road you take, and to take your life and your career paths to a different route. You want a role model? Be your own role model to your kids and tell them the difference between what's right and what's wrong. He knows that, and his audience knows that it's played for satire. And not to give away spoilers to those who haven't seen this movie, it's just a relief that the right people get what they deserve, be it good or bad. And I think Benny Boom's movie directing debut deserves more credit than what's given to him. So I do truly highly recommend you see this movie, not to take it seriously, not to take it personally, and just go for the ride. What have you got to lose? So I guess this ends my ride review. If I was to give this movie a score out of 10, by the way, I would give this movie, Next Day Air, an 8 out of 10. So I guess this ends my ride review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules. Be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. Sorry, I had to clear my throat. And I'll be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Correct Rider saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.